Hey there, Jonathan Mark Mendes, Painted Love, and welcome to my channel. For today's tutorial, I'm rolling back to the basics. It's not quite the full-on tutorial that I usually do. It's a sped up video with lots of commentary. That's because I've been super busy with interior projects. We're currently stood in my closet, kind of dressing room closet slash office, which is yet to be finished. I've got a lovely bureau to paint for my office side of this room, which will come in a couple of weeks. But I wanted to show you around the room, which will be at the end of this short tutorial. It's only going to be about 10-15 minutes long. I'm probably going to do more talking here than the actual footage that you're going to see of me painting this cabinet. Now, I started this earlier on in the week. If you didn't catch the live, before I started painting, I did a little bit of commentary on the basics of chalk paint and maybe hanging hardware, so it could be useful. I will link that into the description box below, and hopefully there'll be some useful information throughout this sped up video for you guys, so check it out. I'll see you on the other side. So off we go with our first coat of Annie Sloan chalk paint in Old White. So I've decided to work this piece with chalk paint just because this pine dresser did have a wax finish. Now, a little unknown fact is that you can paint over a wax finish. So if you've got a previously painted Annie Sloan piece of furniture and it's had a wax finish, as long as that wax has cured, you can use chalk paint straight over the top. No need to remove. This is the beauty of Annie Sloan chalk paint. It is so easy, very minimal prep work. You can get issues throughout the process with bleed through. This piece actually did kick back at me. Now, pine doesn't normally do that, but this one did on the top. The reason it did is because it had watermarks. Now, Mr. M left some plants on top of this and spillages, and they really came back to plague me, which you'll see later on in the tutorial. But that first coat went on nice and even. Thin coats of chalk paint, just generally not too thick. You don't need to try and get a full coverage on that first coat of paint. Just literally go in with, tickle the surface of the timber with your paintbrush. I'm using a medium Annie Sloan oval natural bristle brush, and I find these to be great to spread around. The bristle count is really high in those brushes, so you can get into all of the nooks and crannies. And notice that I'm going around the edges of the drawer first, then working into that detail, and then finishing off on the flat surface. And also you can see that I've pre-prepped with a little bit of masking tape to the ends of the drawers to make for a nice finish. All of the pine on the interior of this cabinet is wonderful. So here we have it. This is what bleed through can look like. These are bleed through from watermarks. You can see where plant pots have been and spillages. I always like to use one coat of chalk paint on my piece first so that I can see where all of the bleed through is. A lot of people worry about this. No problem. I'm going in with a stain blocking primer, and I only needed to do the top surface. So this has saved me some time. If you don't have a stain blocking primer and you have Annie Sloan satin paint, this works beautifully as a stain blocking primer. You can marry in the same color or close shade. In this case, I would use Old White in the satin. And once that has dried, I will go back in for my second coat of chalk paint, and everything should be perfect at that point. As you can see, I'm going in right now for a second coat. Usually when you're using a pale colour, I would say 2.5 coats, definitely on paler wood. When I say half a coat, that sounds strange, but that's usually just a tickle here and there on edges, places where it may have not covered on a sharp edge. So 2 coats is sufficient, but a little tickle with that third coat. And as you can see, the colour's built up really, really well. And you may not be able to see on this video, but the stain blocking primer has done the trick. Whilst I'm working on the front of the drawers without the drawers in, I'm being very mindful not to build up too much paint into the connections between the sides of the cabinets and those long lengths. I still don't know what they're called. I call them stringers. The dividers between the drawers, not to get too much paint into connections. And the same thing around the edges of the drawers, making sure not to leave any drips or heavy paint anywhere on the edges, because once these drawers go back in, this will create a lot of traction, and it could chip off your paint on the edges. I'm also not painting the sides of the drawers. The reason being is that the pine is so lovely, it's in good clean condition. A lot of people would paint a pop of colour inside. I'm just going to leave it as this because I do change my furniture quite a lot. And if I choose to change the colour, there's not too much work when it comes to sanding the edges of the drawers. If you're working on a set of drawers that are quite tight when it comes to the edges of the sliders, then I would most definitely stay away from painting too much paint on the sides of the drawers. You could use satin, it will have a better glide, but you will need longer curing time, say about 20 days before you start pushing those drawers in and out. These are all things that you will learn along the way when using chalk paint and satin paint. They have their different possibilities. I think furniture painting for me is, you know, a series of problem solving along the way. You will hit things along the way. It'll always be a bumpy road, but you will work out slowly the things that you can and can't do. Everything has its boundaries, and chalk paint for me has been probably one of the most creative paints that I've ever used. So certainly when it comes to blending and, you know, artwork, which if you're not new to this, you will have experienced this, you will have gone through with many different things that you love to use chalk paint for, and it's great for flat finish. The reason that I didn't go with satin paint for this, and I would have done because I love that finish, is because of the wax. I just wanted to cut down the amount of work. I was working at speed to try and get this room done. So if I was using satin paint on a wax finish, I will most definitely remove that wax before using the satin paint. It could resist on that first coat. So that's why I didn't go with satin, and we're using chalk today. Now I'm moving on to my wax finish. Now the whole chest of drawers has had a good few hours of drying time. You can probably tell by the light, it was getting late on in the evening, but I did start this in the afternoon. So you can see it doesn't take too long to complete a project with chalk paint. The best way for me to apply my wax is with an Annie Sloan wax brush. Now, this is not essential. If you're a beginner, you don't have to invest straight away into a wax brush, but I would advise to do that eventually because it cuts down the time. You can use a lint-free cloth to apply your wax. I've heard of people using sponges, and even somebody once said to me that they use their hands. Now, I think that's rather strange, but hey-ho, any way to get the job done. So I'm putting the drawers back into position and removing the tape to the sides of the drawers, ready to apply my handles, which I pre-drilled the holes ahead of any painting. I made sure that all my holes were in place to apply the hardware. This is because you don't want to be drilling on a newly painted surface. You could scratch or mark any of the lovely paint finish that you've created over the time, and it does cut down a little bit of work later to do that ahead of time, which I have covered off in my live tutorial just a few days ago, which I'll link into the description box below so you can catch up on that. But for now, this is the end of the project. Stick around just after these shots and you can see a little bit more of the dressing room as we are close to finishing it. Thank you so much, and I will catch you all next time in my studio to bring you a brand new tutorial very soon. Take care. So I decided to start with what we've done in this room. The ceiling is painted pure white, and then we have some crown moulding that we added to the top of this room, and old white paint on the walls, Annie Sloan old white. As you can see, we've also painted the rails. We've added shelves. You can see all of my shoes at the top there. Lots of rails for all of the clothes. The window frame has been painted with a good old mix of satin paint. I cannot tell you the actual mix of that. I put lots of colours to kind of get like a chateau grey. It's close to, it's quite close to Chicago grey with a green hint. So you can mix satin paint. I've tried it, it does work. So we're lacking a blind. A blind will go up next week when that arrives. As you can see, there's the drawers. I decided to put a freestanding chest of drawers, so everything in this room can be moved. Even the rails can come down, all of that shelving can come down, and it could become a bedroom again, a great den for a young child with an office area at the other side. But as you can see, panelling on the walls, same colour on the skirting boards as the window frames. Up here, right the way up, this was the walls that we built in just to screen off a little bit of the dressing area. So there we go. New lights. We had to put a light at that end because it was so dark. There was only one at this end. Let me show you from another angle. Okay, so we're on the other side of the room. Same thing. You can see the walls from the other side. Again, a blind needed because we are quite exposed to our neighbours. You can see the house next door, they've got their blind up. And this is the other area. Now, the piece of furniture you see there is not staying. That's going to be the office side, and that's going into a small bedroom. The radiator has Annie Sloan satin paint. That is graphite. I do remember this mix. Graphite, a touch of Oxford Navy, and a touch of Athenian. That was just to match in with the other radiators in the house. And there you go, there's the cabinet that is old white to match in with the walls. We're going to have a little rug that runs through the middle just to soften the area. And I'm thinking the office area, the bureau, I'm going to do bright orange, a nice pop of colour in this room. And finally, this piece of furniture, if you've never seen it before, I painted this probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It is all chalk paint and it is all hand painted. That came shortly after my first can of Annie Sloan Old White. So the proof in the pudding is you can paint anything. You know, ultimately I started out like that and ended up somewhere like that, hand painting pieces. A lot of people think this is decoupage. It was pre any decoupage paper for furniture. It is all hand painted. Let's give you a close-up. And it's a piece that has moved all around the house. We once had it in a living room. You can see all of the texture. Can you see? All different colours of Annie Sloan chalk paint. And also I gilded the edges with, let me go down to the bottom. That's all been gilded, primer red underneath. And it's been gilded with gold leaf, and it's tarnished. It's gone quite dark, which is lovely. Lots of wax. On the top, let's go up here. On the top, crackled Annie Sloan paint. It's a bit beat up now, but I think this is getting better with age, to be fair. It will stay with me in the smaller guest bedroom. So yeah, the two opposites of things that you can do with chalk paint.